Good evening to all the participants for joining the webinar on climate change and agriculture, building sustainable future for Puducherry's farmers, organized by Puducherry Climate Change Cell. We are gathered here to explore the urgent impacts of climate change on agriculture and discuss innovative strategies to ensure a resilient and sustainable future for the farming community. On behalf of the Puducherry Climate Change Cell, I cordially invite Dr. R. Sagaya Alfred, Senior Scientific Officer, Department of Science, Technology and Environment, Thiru K. Kalamegam, Environmental Engineer, Department of Science, Technology and Environment, our today's expert, Dr. P. Balabhaskar, Associate Professor, Department of Plant Pathology, Annamalai University, and the participants from various departments for this informative webinar. I now request Dr. R. Sagaya Alfred, Senior Scientific Officer, Department of Science, Technology and Environment, to deliver the keynote address.
Am I audible, Tenmuli?
Yes, sir, you're audible, sir.
Thank you. Happy evening to each and every one of you who are on this platform today to attend the webinar on climate change and agriculture, building sustainable future for Puducherry's farmers. We all know that the climate change, it poses significant threats to Puducherry's agriculture sector. It has its impacts on fertile lands, traditional practices, as well as it affects farmers' livelihoods. Of late, we are experiencing erratic rainfall, rising temperatures, water scarcity, and very unpredictable weather patterns that jeopardize our crop yields, soil health, as well as our food security. We have to address all these challenges, for which the government of Puducherry has initiated programs like the Puducherry Climate Resilient Agriculture Project that promotes climate resilient practices to enhance more of productivity, improve water management, and also to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Transitioning to climate smart agriculture will be the key factor. Crop diversification, precision farming, and many organic practices that can boost productivity as well as it can also reduce our environmental impact. A lot of efficient irrigation systems has come into place, drip, sprinkler methods, and many more conservation process that improves the water resources as well as maintaining our traditional knowledge. Climate resilient native crops that can complement with our modern techniques to address climate changes. And investments in agriculture infrastructure, if you see, it includes supply chains, cold storage, and easy market access that are essential to reduce post harvest losses, which also empowers farmers economically. Additionally, government efforts to promote organic farming, soil health management, as well as agroforestry will improve the incomes and contribute to a sustainable food ecosystem. If you collaborate with all policymakers, researchers, and industries, it will be an added advantage to a climate resilient technologies, which includes renewable energy and long-term sustainability policies. The Department of Science, Technology and Environment, Government of Puducherry, is keenly revising the State Action Plan on Climate Change, wherein the Department of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, they have envisaged several climate adaptation strategies for the years ahead. Rice intensification schemes, promotion of millet cropping, skill development of women farmers, capacity building to all the farmers or organic farming practices, as well as sustainable irrigation practices are some of the notable strategies that are promoted for sustainable agriculture in Puducherry. So, by combining all these innovations with the tradition and fostering partnerships with all stakeholders, Puducherry can transform challenges into opportunities. They can build a resilient agriculture ecosystem which will secure a sustainable future, not for us, but for the future generations to come. And thank you for the opportunity provided. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It is now time to introduce our today's expert. Dr. Bala Bhaskaran is a professor of plant pathology and director for admission in Annamalai University, Tamil Nadu. He has authored two books and has published more than 50 articles in national and international journals and has guided six PhDs. I now request Dr. B. Balabhaskar, Associate Professor, Department of Plant Pathology, Annamalai University, to give the presentation on climate change and agriculture, building sustainable future for Puducherry farmers. Sir, it is audible, sir. You can just start presenting your
Yeah,
presentation.
yeah, yeah. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir.
And first of all, I would like to. So, first of all, I thank the organizers for the wonderful opportunity given to me to share some of my experience or some of my thoughts on the very important topic of climate change and agriculture and building sustainable future. The topic has been given to me very specifically for Puducherry farmers, but I'm trying to discuss some of the issues, but general issues which will hold good for Puducherry farmers also. So that way, I hope I'm audible to everyone and I'm reaching everyone.
Yeah, you're reachable, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. So, as far as my topic is concerned, I'm going to have my presentation in this more four major thing. That's first, we'll try to understand the impact of climate change or what is climate change. Then let us discuss something on the key adaptation strategies and what is actually the next generation farming practices which can address all these issues. And finally, we are trying to have an integrated approach with the natural strategies and future threats. To have an understanding about climate change, as everyone knows, it's driven by the human activity, and human beings are the worst culprits. Their activity actually enhances the greenhouse gas emissions because of the burning of fossil fuels, deforestation, and also the industrial practices that we do. Actually, what these gases do is that they trap the heat in the atmosphere, and which leads to the rise in the global temperatures, changing in the weather patterns, and extreme events like a drought, flood, or storm, and so on and so forth. So I just mentioned some of the greenhouse gases. For example, it's carbon dioxide is the one which has got 76% of the global greenhouse gas emission, and this has got a long-lasting impact and stays in the atmosphere years together. The then second largest one is methane, which basically is emitted through our agricultural practice, especially when we grow a lot of paddy in the inundated conditions. When we have this algal population huge, we tend to get more of methane emission. Similarly, fossil fuel extraction and all those things leads to the release of this methane gas, which amounts to around 16% of the global emissions. but it is more 80 times more than potent than the carbon dioxide. Similarly, some of the activities that we do, like biomass mining and the industrial waste, generates nitrous oxide, which contributes only to 6% of the global emission, but it is 300 times more potent than the carbon dioxide. And the worst culprit is the refrigeration, air conditioning, because none of the houses in our area are without AC machines and electronics and other manufacturing thing, which contributes the fluorinated gases that we call it as, which contributes only to 2% of the global emission, but there are thousands and thousand times more toxic than this carbon dioxide. So as a result of that, recently during January 2025, so there is a United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change came up with a treaty in Paris, which is called as Paris Agreement, which aims to reduce the global warming by 2 degrees at least, for which they have given notifications to the developing countries to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions at least by 45% by 2030, because now it is expected that 2025 we expect to have a peak and at least 45% of the emission should be brought down by 2030, so that we will be able to reduce the raising temperatures by 1.5 degrees. So coming to the impacts that we are going to have because of this climate change, the main problem that we are to address is the raising temperature, which will not only reduce the crop yield because it creates the heat stress on plants, reduces photosynthesis and also the nutrient contents. Especially in Kuruai paddy cultivation and all that, when the temperature shoots up above 35 degrees during flowering and all that, we tend to get reduced grain setting. Grain filling will be very much affected because of these increasing temperatures. Similarly, it affects the rainfall patterns very severely, and the change in the rainfall patterns may result in water scarcity in some cases, droughts in some cases, and in severe drought in some other cases. Especially, not only that, in other extreme, it will lead to storm, unexpected floods, as the flood we experienced during the recent past in the Puducherry, and also cyclones, because a country like India, especially in the peninsular region where we live, it is unpredictable, especially being the subtropical regions. Prediction of the atmospheric weather is very difficult, and combined with this global warming because of the greenhouse emissions, it makes the problem worse. So similarly, not only these rising temperatures or the precipitation patterns affects the crop yield directly, but also it affects the population of the pest, whether it's in terms of insects or in terms of diseases that damage the crops. Their population is very much disrupted, and as a result, we get some diseases coming up very seriously, whereas in some pests, it drastically declines. So that way, this crop, the rising temperatures or the climate change, the primary thing that we look at is the reduced crop yield. Because, every time farmers, they lose huge money because of these pest problems. Normally, we used to say around 40% of the crop produce is lost by pest damages. Adding to the woe, we get the climate change, which aggravates the issue, and the losses, runs into billions. Okay, especially because of the plant diseases and plant insects, uh, and their change of population of those things. Not only the economic loss, which runs into billions, it also affects the quality of the produce. So some of the time, we'll have to compromise the quality. Whenever we lose the quality of the produce, it leads to poor marketability. The consumer demand will be reduced. As a result, farmers are forced to spray many chemicals even after post-harvest, and then, it reduces the marketability as well, the quality issues also arises. So there is a lot of residual toxicity nowadays being reported, which is again a very serious issue that we are coming forward. And not only this, as a whole, if you look at holistic thing, the food security itself, becomes a question, because the food supply chain is disrupted, and as a result, the supply of food. Now, probably, we are a little bit safe as our annual production of food grains goes beyond the 300 million tons, whereas, we need around only 235 or 260 million tons. But however, if the situation continues to grow in the same way, we are going to have a disruption in the food supply chain, and thereby, the demand for food and the access to food by everyone will be a question mark. So that demands effective management strategy, especially, sometimes. So this is the thing that I was talking about. Recent past, we had the cyclone Bengal affecting Puducherry, and especially there is a statistic which says, around 5,400 hectares in Puducherry got affected with 4,400 hectares of paddy gone into the waters, because almost every crop was likely to be harvested in 20-30 days, which had a very severe flood. And similarly, sugarcane, which was cultivated in some hectares of land other than the horticulture crops, vegetables we had, close to 320 acres. 320 hectares got affected, and the damage was very severe. I'm going to give two examples of crops where we have a very severe impact on the crop productivity and the shift in the pest pattern, which affects the farmers in a huge way. Since Puducherry is governed by two major crops, one is paddy and sugarcane, I'm going to give just two examples. And as I told you in the beginning itself, during flowering, especially in the crude seasons, we now come across 35 degrees and above, which affects the grain filling, and poor the grains become chaffy. So that invariably it affects the crop productivity. Similarly, this unpredictable rainfall leads to floods, and in some cases it goes to water shortage. In some cases, there is excessive floods. Demands a shift in the cultivation pattern also. Actually, we in Annamalai University came up with a variety called Sigapi. I don't know. Many of the Puducherry people have also started cultivating that variety. It was actually, a variety with submergent tolerant gene inserted in it. We had a collaboration with Erie Philippines, and through them, we were able to develop that variety, which can sustain the submergence for quite some period. During the 2018 floods, which we had in Kerala, all the other even conventional varieties failed, but this one variety, which we supplied to the Kerala farmers, stood tall, and it sustained the damage, and we are unable, we became successful in that particular area. Okay. Similarly, the increased pest and diseases, because the warmer climate, we have extensive regions, and the spread of pest also becomes very severe. And in a couple of slides, I'll show you what are all the diseases that has changed, that has come into increase. Similarly, this is again in the keynote address, I was mentioning about this, the soil degradation, quality of soil, and salinity, enhancement in the salinity. This happens mainly because of the intrusion of seawater. Because in Annamalai University, especially, our TDS goes above 1,500 ppm, and makes our cultivation practices very, very difficult. So that is mainly because of even the groundwater is very poor in quality. We were unable to irrigate the water that for crop cultivation, because once you use that, the crop tends to be failing often. Okay, so this is again a major issue that we in the coastal region, we are likely to get affected. Similarly, as I told you in the beginning, the inundated conditions where we grow paddy, coupled with the algal population, will increase the methane emissions, which will also add to the thing. So I'm just giving you a few diseases which are now picking up because of the climatic change. One is this false mud. We call that as Lakshmi disease, because earlier we used to say whenever you come across this disease, farmers used to get a bumper harvest. But nowadays, this has become so serious that it affects almost every crop, even the white pony variety, which is known to be very resistant to all the crop diseases, is now being very severely affected by this. This year, fortunately, we did not have much of this problem, because this year the climate is not that favorable. But last year and before that, 2022-21, we had a devastating thing. Similarly, the other disease which is now ramping is this rice tungro disease, a viral disease which is transmitted by the green leaf hoppers. And the shift in the climatic patterns helps the green leaf hoppers to increase in population, go in multiply in numbers, which adds the problem of tungro, which easily transmits that. And similarly, coming to one bacterial problem, the farmers, especially in our coastal regions, are prone to be cultivating this paddy in a huge number, huge areas, and especially during summer, they grow this variety BPT 5204, which is actually susceptible to many of the diseases, especially this bacterial leaf blight. Because our situation now, because of the non-availability of water and poor water reach to the fag end of the canal irrigation areas, especially in the Kaveri basins, river basin area, we are forced to grow variety like this. And unfortunately, once the people who grow paddy blast, will have very severe infection of paddy blast disease, that is BPT. BPT, whoever grows BPT has to come across infection of blast and as well as bacterial leaf blight. And the other one is bacterial leaf streak, which is also becoming very serious nowadays because of the prolonged cooler climate, prevailing cooler climate during this December, January, and delayed harvest. So, with regard to paddy, these diseases have now become very rampage because of the climatic change and as well as in the shift in the environmental patterns. Similarly, I take the opportunity with the sugarcane cultivation, and sugarcane is one crop which requires huge nutrients for its growth and development. Sugar cane is now being cultivated for two reasons. Because earlier, we used to say sugar as a major product, but sugar has now become a byproduct. Whereas the products like ethanol or your bagasse or your press mud, all of those become very important. And especially the ethanol is becoming a very important co-unit of a sugar industry. Because of the problem of the residual disposal, ethanol production is also becoming very difficult nowadays because the effluent that comes out of the sugar industry or the distilleries has got very high BOD, which makes the disposal very difficult. So, but still, now the government has come out with plans to mix this ethanol with petrol so as to use in the vehicle fuel. So thereby, sugarcane has become a indisposable crop, and there are a lot of diseases now which are now picking up like red rot because there is a shift in the varietal composition because of this red rot. Earlier, most of our area were known to be cultivated with one variety called the COC 671. That 671 was a very good variety in terms of sugar recovery as well as crop yield. Whereas, that is highly susceptible to red rot, which forced farmers to go for alternate varieties. But because of the problem shift in the cultivation practice and the flooding is one major culprit in spread of this red rot pathogen. And now red rot is becoming revamping even in an improved variety like COC 86032, which is not able to sustain now in the field. So besides that, the changes in the temperatures, prolonged increased temperature, prolonged flooding, and so on and so forth affects the sugarcane crop yield. And now you will be able to see these diseases very commonly. And one is this yellow leaf disease, the other one is the Pakubayang disease. This Pakubayang is almost devastating the crop in almost every coastal belt, especially in Kaduru district. We are also now started getting this grassy shoot disease. All these diseases are fairly new, and this Pakubayang is now literally unmanageable. So the farmers are forced to change their cropping pattern to paddy or some other crop because of these diseases. Okay. So now coming to the adaptation strategies, what can we do for all these things? So it is very clear that the change in the shift in the environmental pattern and the other things definitely demands certain adaptation areas. Hope I am reaching everyone, or should I speak in Tamil also? Madam?
Sir, it is okay, sir.
Okay, thank you. So, no need for Tamil, right?
No, sir. தேவைப்படாது. Everybody can
Okay.
understand.
Thank you, thank you. So that probably I'm doing it. So earlier, when we were talking about these adaptation strategies, we used to have a very good insight on the conservation tillage. We talked about a lot on the zero tillage operations also. Uh, Earlier, farmers used to have this cover cropping, which will have a very distinct effect on the soil environment as well as the conserving of all the natural enemies and other things. Similarly, people used to have a part of agroforestry in every area, and organic farming is the need of the day, and the people have started talking about this organic farming. Every one comes out with their own ideologies. The Nammalwar, who was a proud alumni of Annamala University, proposed the organic farming in the name of natural farming. And Subhash Paleka, a Maharashtrian, but now being a consultant for two states, I believe. One is Maharashtra and the other one is Karnataka. He has been doing with zero budget farming. So all these organic farming or natural farming or zero budget farming aims resources, utilize the resources which are renewable. Similarly, the water management strategies are needed because many of the areas we come across with problems of water shortage, or the other extreme we have something like uh, excess water or the flooding. Excuse me, Raghu, sorry, I had an important call. Tell him that I am in a meeting. Similarly, the focus is to be given much on the composting of organic waste and recycling it in a better way. Especially, in areas like Punjab and Haryana, the farmers have the practice of firing the crop residues, which had an impact on the pollution problem, which is very much pronounced in Delhi. So now, government has also initiated several initiatives to promote organic farming, and almost every state is also being encouraged to do that. Similarly, another area which we can talk about is the polyculture and then intercropping. In this particular thing, our ancient people used to do this very effectively, because this polyculture or this intercropping used to have a dynamism in the population of crops. Similarly, it will harbor an equilibrium in the biological components of the agro ecosystem. Similarly, the biodynamic farm aims at utilizing the organic and recyclable residues into agriculture so as to be sustainable. And now, recent past, we have been talking about this precision agriculture, and areas like Dharmaburi district, Krishnagiri, they have been doing a lot of successful cropping with this precision agriculture, and they are very successful also. And one thing which we have already forgotten is the livestock integration into the cropping patterns. Because earlier, we used to have a integrated way of rearing all our livestock, and that helped farmers to enrich their soils effectively and maintain the sustainability. Similarly, those days, farmers used to maintain and conserve the local varieties. But after the green revolutions and after the demand for once agriculture becomes, money oriented, the continuous cropping necessitated farmers to go in for short duration varieties and the high yielding varieties, which actually, made farmers to have a problem in the conservation of local varieties. Probably we need to have a relook on these things and then try to popularize all those things. So when you do all these things, we will try to maintain the agroecology in an effective way, which will accommodate all the counterparts in that ecosystem. And once you achieve all these things, we will be able to have our agriculture as sustainable. So sustainable agriculture will focus on improving or promoting the plant health, so that we overall will be able to maintain the plant health, which will have a sustainable increase in the yield. Not only the plant health, but it will also enhance the soil health, because it will improve the soil structure, soil fertility, and the microbial activity, because soil itself is having a whole lot of microbial activity, and the techniques like composting, green manuring, or adding FIM, all these things will be able to maintain the soil health in total. Besides, as I told you, when you do these conventional practices, that will encourage and maintain, sustain the biodiversity in that particular ecosystem, which is actually the need of the hour. And all these things naturally will lead to reducing the chemical dependency because we have been dependent on chemical in terms of pesticides as well as in terms of chemical fertilizers. Okay, so whenever farmers are able to see the crop little sick, immediately they used to apply urea or DAP or whatever chemical fertilizer, which indirectly affects the soil ecosystem also. So now the adoption strategies in 2010 itself, the WHO has come out with a climate smart agriculture program, which focused on many areas, which focused on the holistic development of agriculture, where people talked about the climate resilient crop management, so that they were trying to identify drought tolerant or heat tolerant crops and identify the crop diversifications to find out the suitable crops for the particular areas and to have a scientific shift in the planting schedule because there is a huge gap in the environmental strategies. Similarly, the climate smart agriculture focuses on soil and water conservation, where we are trying to focus on the efficient irrigation systems like subsoil irrigation or drip irrigation or sprinkler irrigation and so on and so forth. Similarly, it focuses on the climate smart pest and disease management. The CSP and management, CSPM, focuses on again a holistic thing where it will address a little later. No, I will talk about that in an elaborate way. And it will address again holistically all the counterparts in the ecosystem, which will even address the supply chain also. Similarly, the integration of livestock adaptation strategies, because we are trying to bring back the livestock's native breeds plus improved breeds, so that farmers will be able to maintain them and include in the integrated farming systems for livestock farming. Okay. And finally, we also have the digital technological innovations where we have the AI based thing, remote sensing, and all these things, will help farmers devise strategies. And not only this AI or the digital technology will help the farmers, but also will be able to support the extension workers to transfer the knowledge to the farmers in an effective way. So we were now talking about the integrated pest management strategies, and just now I was telling you about all those things. When we talk about this integrated pest management strategy, that actually eliminates or reduces the chemical use, and it enhances biodiversity because many of the integrated pest management strategy involves use of natural products or animal experiments or the plant-based products or the antagonistic organisms or the antagonistic insect populations. So it integrated pest management is, as a whole is a holistic approach, and one such important component in that is the cultural practices. Almost we have forget about these things, and definitely farmers should be equipped or advised with these cultural practices so that they will be able to have a sustainable crop production in a better way. That aims from crop spacing or mulching, pruning, irrigation management, crop rotation especially. I'll talk about crop rotation and need for that. And similarly, soil solarization. Earlier, farmers used to have this soil solarization very effectively by doing summer plowing. Now, because of the want of continuous cropping, we are unable to do this soil solarization that effectively. Anyhow, these things are to be brought back to the farmers if at all we want to do it. And I told you about crop rotation. It has many benefits. Unfortunately, that's what earlier farming used to do because this crop rotation reduces soil-borne diseases. Because once you do that, the pathogen will be devoid of crops and they will be starving out of want of crops. Similarly, the crop rotation with the leguminous crops or the other crops improves the soil fertility also. And most importantly, it enhances the biodiversity, prevents nutrition depletion, And finally, it is able to increase the yield stability and stabilize them in a sustainable way. Okay, so that way we have to have a relook on the cultural practices, think about crop rotations in the cultivation programs, and utilize more of these biological methods in the pest management strategies, like the antagonistic organisms which I was talking about, like Bacillus subtilis, Trichoderma, all these insects, beneficial insects like ladybugs, or the Trichogramma, the egg parasite. So all those things should be brought back and then put into the ecosystem so that we'll be able to have a sustainable production. I purposefully avoided this Pseudomonas fluorescens because there is a controversy on that use of Pseudomonas being human pathogenic, but it is not so. But many of the people are a little worried about that, so I have not included. Purposely, I have reduced that. In the case of the organic methods, organic amendments actually plays a very important role. Organic amendments like FIM, compost or mulchings. Similarly, now I was telling you about the zero budget farming which has been proposed by Subhash Palekar. He promotes a lot of this use on the Jiva Murda. They call organic formulation, the Gana Jiva Murda, Neem Astra, Agni Astra, and so on and so forth. Everyone knows about Panchagavya. These use of these products actually aims to improve the soil biology and soil ecosystem and helps in maintaining the soil health. And these organic amendments in any form, if you keep applying to the soil, it is going to improve the nutrient availability, reduces soil compaction, soil texture. I was telling you, it increases the soil texture, and it maintains the beneficial microbial activity. That is more important. And once you start using these organic amendments, it retains moisture to a longer extent, requiring less frequent irrigations. So that way, this use of organic amendments should also be brought into the farming patterns. So now coming to the next gen farming practices, this is not going to be the future, and we should also integrate these strategies into our farming patterns. This I was telling you about climate smart pest management. This is actually a part of this FIO recommendations done during 2010 with climate smart agriculture. And this climate smart pest management actually is to build resilience in agriculture against climatic changes or against all sorts of threats or the difficulties in the cultivation practices to get sustainable yields. Normally, this climate pest management, smart pest management is a holistic approach. It reduces the pest-induced crop losses or the crop losses that come across with climatic changes. Similarly, it enhances the adaptability to ecosystem services by giving predictions. So we will be able to predict the possible change in the ecosystem, thereby change in the biodiversity, and we can have our own change in the activities of farming, which will have a sustainable effect. The third one is most important is the reduced greenhouse gas emissions. So that is going to have a very beneficial impact on the environment as well as the pest populations. So once you achieve all these things, we should be able to get an agricultural resilience, which will have a sustainable effect. So the CFPM functions, I said it is a holistic approach. I told you, it is pest risk forecasting. The first and foremost thing, we will be able to predict and have a correlation with the climatic information. And then, we should be able to derive the policies, incentives, and the financial support that to the farmers. Okay. Similarly, we'll be able to have a diagnostic surveillance and then, do assessments, and then farmers could be very effectively educated on management strategies. And extension research also is going to be very much used in this thing. And as a whole, we will be able to get resilience in the farming patterns, and the yield also will be able to be sustained. Another important area where we are now started concentrating is the site-specific nutrient management, and SSNM is again a precision agriculture approach where we are trying to use or optimize the use of nutrient on need based. This involves site specific soil testing, and though there are some practical difficulties, this will have a very long interpretation, a very long impact on the sustainability of the agricultural patterns and agricultural productivity. Because now the use of indiscriminate use of fertilizers as well as pesticides causes huge, excuse me, this indiscriminate use of pesticides causes huge losses to the farmers as well as poses a threat to the environment as well as the cropping pattern. Okay, very specifically because of the use of the pesticides in an indiscriminate way. Even mother's milk has been tested positive for the presence of the pesticide residues, and many of the pesticides are now being constantly banned for to be used in the cropping system. Similarly, by applying more of inorganic fertilizers, we are going to disrupt the soil ecosystem and reduce the population of beneficial microbe, which is again to have again a negative impact on the cultivation as well as in the productivity of the crop. So once we start thinking about the site-specific nutrient management, that is also is going to have a long-lasting effect on the nutrient use efficiency, maintaining soil health, and sustainable crop productivity, which will also have beneficial impact on the environment. So these are all the important features of this site-specific nutrient management. As I told you, we have now developed, the leaf color chart, so as to have a usage of wastage of avoid wastage of N fertilizer. So once you use this leaf color chart, we'll be able to reduce the wastage of nitrogen or even avoid excess application of nitrogen as fertilizer. Because excess application of nitrogen is going to have negative impact on the pest population as well as the uptake of other nutrient by the plants. Similarly, now studies are going on to omit nitrogen in the system so as to have effective usage of utilization of phosphorus and potassium into the crop pit. Similarly, once you reduce or rationalize the usage of fertilizers, we are going to have a very good economic effect on the returns to the farmers. So naturally, it is going to increase the sustainability and increase the profitability to the farmers. So final part I am just getting in, and so we are now trying to integrate because purely going into the modern technologies or purely farming, doing this conventional system of agriculture may not be enough. So we like to integrate the natural conventional systems and the modern one so that we'll have a future trend. So once the ideology is we'll be able to focus on the precision agriculture technologies, and now government itself is now trying to give a lot of subsidies and uh, financial support to the farmers to farm this precision agriculture technology, and which advanced of it is the polyhouse technology. And the only problem with adaptation of polyhouse is that it's a very high initial cost because per acre, the farmer have to spend around close to 40-50 lakhs to construct even the polyhouse. But every farmer may not be able to adapt that. Similarly, the plant-based products should be brought into usage so that the plant-based products are going to form an inexhaustible resource which can be renewable also. So naturally, that is going to help us in future to have a sustainable effect on the crop management or crop protection strategies. Similarly, we'll have to focus on advances in the genetic resistance because we need to conserve the genetic advantages that we come across in the conventional varieties. Especially, now we are trying to bring back the conventional varieties like, in paddy especially, Skarpa Gauni, all these Gauni varieties or Mable Samba, all these are now targeted specific to the audience, specific to the end users. And now farmers have started using this genetic resources to the better of their advantage. Similarly, the another important aspect, the adaptation of biocontrol agents and integration of the organic farming practices. So initially, this biocontrol use of biocontrol or the scientific finding about biocontrol came in the year 1930s, early 1930s. But close to 100 years, even after 100 years of its invention, we are unable to have more than 2% of the farmers following this use of biocontrol agent. And there are a lot of reasons for that. But still, we must find some ways. After the introduction of the liquid formulations of the biocontrol agents, the adaptation has increased a little bit. But still, our adaptation rate of use of this biocontrol agent for crop disease management or the pest management goes only 3 to 4%. So we still have around close to 90-92% of potential that are to be addressed. So probably that also will enhance the climate change advance. Now coming to this latest technologies which can be merged into this conventional things. One is use of this artificial intelligence and machine learning, and which will be very good in developing predictive models or forecast disease outbreaks or pest outbreaks based on data that we collect. And this AI technology, and there is now an advancement of XAI. XAI is explainable AI technology. That is also now picking up to develop, models for helping farmers. But these models are to be based on sound scientific data that we are lacking actually. Similarly, we are now developing many of the IoT and smart sensors so as to monitor the plant health on a real-time basis. So the real-time monitoring of the plant health will help, detect the diseases or pest problem much earlier and then take up strategies for disease management. Now, this drone technology we are popularizing. Almost this drone technology has been being popularized as a employability for the rural youth, and also cutting edge technology which can be used by farmers to the best of its advantage. So now many of the people are now into this drone technology for the application of pesticides as well as fertilizers. Only problem with this is the user of this drone should be a trained pilot, and it also depends on the wind blowing and all the other things which we will be able to address. Similarly, the other one area which we need to develop is the blockchain development. So we should ensure transparency in the supply chain and to the farmer, and also the buyback chain. That also should be able to be uh, brought into transparency so that farmers will be able to get the real benefit. Many of the time, because of the lack of this transparency in the supply chains, the middlemen only are known to enjoy the benefit instead of farmers. So that we need to again have a look into it so that the problems are solved and sustainability is achieved. So finally, I try to discuss something on the challenges that we come across on mitigating this climate change or the impact of the climate change. So one is the high initial cost. I was telling about the construction cost of polyhouse. That involves a huge 50 lakhs per acre, no one will be afford to do that. And the second one is, not only that, many of the strategies, whether we want to use this AI technology or the XAI technology or the IoT or the smart sensors, all these things, are very much involving cost, which needs to be addressed. Similarly, the farmers, especially in South India, there is a lack of awareness, and training is also lacking. So that, even as I told you, adaptation of this biotechnologies or bio inputs are going to be very very difficult by the farmers because of the because of the lack of awareness and lack of training. Because many people, if we say to dip it for 20 minutes, they will sprinkle and then do that. So like that, we need to have focus on creating awareness to the farmers and give training to the farmers on the formulation of the organic based products and so on and so forth. And the third one is actually a problem is the limited access to resources. All those organic inputs, were not easy to be accessed by everyone because especially larger farmers are going to face it's very difficult. So we need to concentrate on formulating the products and then make it accessible to every farmer so that we'll be able to come across a better management strategy. Similarly, when we develop, some organic formulations, for example, there is Panchagavya, and every farmer comes out with a strategy. And even Dasagavya, up to Dasagavya, people have got. So Panchagavya involves 5 products, and Dasagavya involves 10 products. So thereby, everyone comes out with organic formulation. And as of now, even the products that we have in the market do not have the regulatory sanctioning. And the regulatory bodies have started looking into those things. And the bio inputs, especially the biofertilizers and antagonistic organisms, are now brought under regulatory issues. And if people who are trying to multiply them and then supply, must have regulatory approval from the authorities. So these regulatory barriers to be removed. Many of the regulatory barriers have very strict regulations, which are need to be addressed, and then make it farmer friendly or a startup company friendly, so that many people will come forward to have startups in the thing, and then we will be able to come across all these issues to build a resilient future for sustainable crop production, not only in Puducherry but also in every area. So future is going to be this AI or XAI and machine learning in the case of monitoring the real-time crop health, and then take up my management thing, and use of the latest technologies in the genomic research to conserve the conventional genetic potentials, and then include in them in the breeding programs so as to develop varieties which can sustain the extremes of climates, whether it is high temperature or prolonged drought or prolonged flooding and so on. And the one successful finding that we have come out is the development of Sikapi variety, which can tolerate flooding or even beach together. Similarly, we will develop the eco-friendly, sustainable farming practices, which will be very simple. And most importantly, now the global village concept can come in. So we need to have collaboration with many countries to share knowledge, especially countries like Israel are doing wonders in terms of agriculture, modernizing agriculture. With the extreme of climate being there in Israel, they are able to have self-sustainability in feeding their own people and achieve greater heights in controlled agriculture in controlled conditions. So that way, if you have some global collaborations, that will be really helpful to manage the adverse effects. And hopefully, with that, we will be able to have a resilient agriculture for sustainable crop productivity, not only in Puducherry, but in every area. So thank you for all your patient hearing. And if you have one or two questions, we'll be able to answer happily.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your informative presentation. Participants, if you are having any questions, you can ask to our resource person.
Hope I have finished in time, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. The general question on the we'll try to have, or if somebody could add or substantiate some points, they can also speak. So if there are no more questions, I'm happy that in the initial keynote address, sir was telling about some initiatives which are taken by Puducherry government to mitigate this climate change effects. So that should be propagated and throughout the country. Already, central government is into it, and our research is also being focused on those areas. Hopefully, sooner or later we'll be able to come out with this. One problem is all these modernization techniques, are based on data. Unfortunately, we don't have a backup data. We don't have a strength in that. So we are facing it little difficult to devise a strategy, that too in a subtropical climate. Because here the climate is going to be very, very vagary, and the climate change or the global warming adds over to the problems. So hopefully we will come out with some better finding solutions in future to have sustainable. Once again, I thank the organizers for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I now request Thiru K. Kalamegam, Environmental Engineer, Department of Science, Technology and Environment, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As we conclude today's insightful webinar on the impacts of climate change on the agriculture sector with specific reference to Puducherry, I am honored to extend our deepest gratitude to all who have made this event a resounding success. First, I would like to express my sincere thanks to Dr. Sagai Alfred, Senior Scientific Officer of DSTE, for delivering an insightful keynote address that set the tone for today's webinar. Next, our heartfelt gratitude goes to our distinguished speaker of today's webinar, Professor Dr. P. Balabhaskar. Sir, your comprehensive analysis of climate resilient crop varieties, particularly in rice and sugarcane cultivation, has shed light on innovative strategies to combat the challenges posed by shifting climatic patterns. Your expertise has provided us with invaluable insights into developing crop varieties that can withstand environmental stresses and ensuring food security in these future times where climate change would pose more threat to especially to Puducherry, being a coastal state. Mm, Also, you have covered very large issues related to climate change in agriculture sectors, including the addressing the methane reduction, climate-induced crop diseases, the impacts of stress and water scarcity in cultivation of paddy and sugarcane, which are water-intensive varieties. Uh, and also, you have covered the adaptation strategies which is required for addressing the challenges of the climate change. Um, it was very thought-provoking, and a lot of information was shared and learned from your presentation, sir. Thank you so much for this very valuable talk made by you. Also, I would like to express my sincere thanks to all the participants here. Around 75 participants had joined us today for this webinar series, and they have been actively participating in this throughout this webinar. So I thank you all for joining us today. Uh, and also the special thanks goes to the organizing team of the Puducherry Climate Change Cell for organizing this a very important webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. We'll now wind up the webinar, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.